Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of absolute precision, like, structural engineering or something.
Right. Yeah.
A patient breaks their arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the attending physician just points to it, says, yep, there's the problem.
It's very binary. It's broken or it's not broken. I mean, we really like pathology to be visible and easily categorized.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of human nutrition and metabolism, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. In fact, based on the text we're analyzing today, a patient can walk into a clinic carrying 100 extra pounds of body fat. And biologically speaking, they could literally be starving to death.
Which completely shatters the traditional binary view of health, right?
Yeah.
To understand how it's physically possible for a patient to be simultaneously obese and severely malnourished, we have to stop looking at nutrition as isolated variables.
We have to look at cascading metabolic systems.
It's all connected.
That paradox, the starving but obese patient, that's the perfect anchor for our deep dive today. So for those of you listening, the medical students, the clinical professionals, maybe you're a self-taught learner trying to decode human biology, we are dissecting The Science of Nutrition by Rhiannon Lambert.
Yes.
Our mission today is to really look under the hood of the human machine, bypassing all the marketing buzzwords, to understand the actual physiological mechanisms of how the body fuels itself.
And well, that clinical definition of malnutrition is really where we have to start. Because malnutrition simply means a severe imbalance of energy and nutrients.
Right.
So in a modern clinical landscape, we frequently see patients who have an enormous excess of energy intake, which is stored as adipose tissue, but who are deeply deficient in the cellular catalysts required to actually run their biology.
So it's like they have plenty of fuel, but they don't have any spark plugs.
That's a great way to put it.
Before we get into those missing catalysts, let's establish what that fuel actually is.
Yeah.
I want to look at the macronutrients, so the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins.
The big three.
Right. We are taught carbs are for energy, proteins are for building, and fats are, historically we've treated fats as basically a cardiovascular enemy.
Which is such a vast clinical oversimplification. I mean, fats are absolutely essential.
Really?
Oh, yeah. When they're broken down into fatty acids and triglycerides, they do provide dense energy, sure, but more importantly, they form the phospholipid bilayer of every single cell membrane in the human body.
Wow.
Yeah, without dietary fat, your cells literally lack structural integrity. And furthermore, fat is a non-negotiable requirement for the absorption of certain vitamins.
Okay, I want to bookmark that vitamin absorption piece because I suspect that ties back to our malnourished patient. But let's look at protein for a second. The text mentions that protein synthesis relies on 20 different amino acids.
It does, and the human body can synthesize 11 of those amino acids internally. The other 9 are deemed essential. And in a clinical context, essential doesn't just mean, important. It means the human body lacks the biochemical pathways to create them.
Oh, I see.
They must, without exception, be sourced from diet.
So what happens if a patient is missing just one of those 9 essential amino acids? Does protein synthesis just slow down?
It halts completely.
Really?
Yeah, it's a limiting factor. If your body is trying to build a specific protein chain, a peptide, and it requires an amino acid you haven't consumed, the chain cannot be completed.
Wow.
The text actually highlights a brilliant example of this, which is insulin. We usually think of insulin merely as a blood sugar regulator, right?
Yeah, of course.
But structurally, insulin is a peptide. It's a protein chain. So if a patient is severely deficient in essential amino acids, they are literally lacking the foundational building blocks to manufacture their own endocrine system.
That completely shifts the perspective.
Yeah.
You aren't just eating a piece of chicken or a bowl of lentils. You're literally ingesting the raw code to manufacture your own hormones. Okay, so if the macronutrients are the raw fuel and the structural building blocks, let's talk about those missing spark plugs, the micronutrients.
Right, the vitamins and minerals. We need them in microscopic quantities compared to carbohydrates or proteins, but they act as the biochemical catalysts for almost every metabolic reaction.
And this is where our obese but starving patient runs into trouble.
Exactly. Let's look at how the body handles different vitamins. We divide them into water-soluble and fat-soluble.
Which seems like a pretty basic distinction, but clinically, the transport mechanisms are entirely different. Water-soluble vitamins, like vitamin C and the B-complex vitamins, they don't accumulate in the body.
Right, they don't.
If you consume a massive dose of vitamin C, your tissues take what they need at that exact moment,
Yeah.
and then your kidneys just filter the rest out into your urine.
Yes, and therefore a patient needs a consistent daily intake of those water-soluble vitamins. Like B vitamins, for instance, are essential coenzymes in the Krebs cycle. They actually facilitate the release of energy from the carbohydrates we just talked about. Without B vitamins, the patient can eat all the glucose in the world, but their cells will struggle to convert it into usable ATP.
Oh, wow. And what about the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K?
Well, they behave more like hormones. Because they are lipophilic, meaning fat-loving, they accumulate in the liver and adipose tissue.
Got it.
But the mechanism of how they function is crucial. Take vitamin D, for example. We always hear vitamin D is for strong bones, right?
Right, milk commercials basically drilled that into us.
Exactly. But how? Vitamin D doesn't build bones directly. When a patient consumes calcium, that calcium enters the intestines, but it can't just pass through the intestinal wall on its own.
It needs help.
Right, it needs a transport protein.
So vitamin D builds the transport protein.
Yes. Active vitamin D enters the nucleus of the intestinal cells and upregulates the expression of a specific protein called carbindin. And then carbindin binds to the calcium and physically carries it across the cell membrane into the bloodstream.
Wait, let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly. A patient could drink like a whole gallon of milk, flooding their intestines with calcium. But if they are clinically deficient in vitamin D, that calcium just passes straight through their digestive tract and out into the toilet.
Yes. The biological machinery to absorb it simply hasn't been built.
Unbelievable.
And this is exactly why our hypothetical patient is malnourished. They are consuming thousands of calories of hyper-processed, nutrient-poor food.
So they have immense energy reserves.
Right, but their bones are demineralizing because they lack vitamin D, and their cells are exhausted because they lack the B vitamins to run the Krebs cycle.
And connecting all of this, the macros, the micros, is water. We really can't talk about water-soluble transport without the medium itself.
Absolutely.
If a patient is dehydrated, their blood volume drops, hydrostatic pressure in the capillaries drops, and the physical delivery of these nutrients to the cells just grinds to a halt.
Water is the universal solvent. Without it, cellular respiration and waste removal both just fail.
So we have the raw materials mapped out. But how does the body actually extract them from the food on the plate? Let's trace that physical journey. The text notes the digestive tract is roughly 30 feet long.
Yeah, it is a highly coordinated sequence of mechanical and chemical breakdown.
And it doesn't start in the stomach. I think a lot of people picture the stomach as the main event. But digestion begins the literal second food enters the mouth.
It does.
Mechanical chewing increases the surface area, while the salivary glands release an enzyme called salivary amylase, which immediately starts cleaving the chemical bonds of complex carbohydrates.
And then the stomach is primarily just a holding and mixing reservoir. It uses hydrochloric acid and pepsin to begin denaturing proteins, turning the food into an acidic slurry called chyme.
Right. But you brought up our malnourished patient earlier, and we have to look at the hormonal signaling happening here. Like, why do they keep overeating nutrient-poor food?
Ah, yes. That brings in the hunger hormones, ghrelin and leptin. When the stomach is empty, it secretes ghrelin, which crosses the blood-brain barrier and binds to receptors in the hypothalamus, triggering the drive to eat.
Okay.
Conversely, adipose tissue secretes leptin, which signals satiety. But in cases of chronic obesity, we often see leptin resistance.
Oh, so the signals get crossed.
Exactly. The fat cells are screaming, we have enough energy, but the brain's receptors have downregulated. The brain actually thinks the body is starving, which drives the patient to consume more.
That is a terrifying biological trap. So the brain is driving them to eat, the stomach churns the food into chyme, and then it gets dumped into the small intestine. And this, structurally, is where the magic happens.
Oh, without a doubt. The small intestine is the undisputed workhorse of nutrient extraction. It's 23 feet long, but its internal surface area is exponentially magnified by millions of microscopic, finger-like projections called villi.
And those are covered in even smaller microvilli, right?
Exactly.
I've always struggled to visualize how the nutrients actually cross that barrier, though. Like, the food is passing over all these tiny structures, but how does a molecule of glucose get out of the intestinal tube and into the blood?
Well, it's through concentration gradients and specific transport proteins. By the time chyme reaches the microvilli, Enzymes have broken down the macros into their smallest components.
So simple sugars, amino acids, and fatty acids.
Right. And because the concentration of glucose is high in the intestine and lower in the blood capillaries inside the villi, glucose moves across the cell membranes. Amino acids and simple sugars enter the bloodstream directly, traveling to the liver via the portal vein.
Wait, what about the fatty acids? You mentioned that they process differently.
Yeah, fatty acids are too large and hydrophobic to enter the capillaries directly.
Oh, okay.
So they are repackaged into molecules called chylomicrons and absorbed into the lymphatic vessels, the lacteals inside the villi. And eventually, they empty into the bloodstream near the heart.
Okay, if the small intestine is doing 90% of the heavy lifting, absorbing the sugars, the proteins, the fats, the vitamins, what is the clinical relevance of the large intestine? Is it just like a biological trash compactor pulling water out of the waste?
Well, that was actually the prevailing medical assumption for decades. But the large intestine is an entirely different ecosystem. It is the primary residence of the human gut microbiota.
Trillions of bacteria, fungi, and viruses.
Exactly.
But what are they feeding on if the small intestine already took all the usable food?
They feed on what we cannot digest, which is dietary fiber. Human enzymes cannot break down the complex carbohydrate structures of plant fiber, but our gut bacteria have the enzymes to ferment it.
Oh, interesting.
And when they ferment fiber, they excrete byproducts called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
I see SCFAs mentioned constantly in modern literature, but what is the actual mechanism? Like, how does a bacterial byproduct in the colon affect the rest of the body?
It acts as a powerful signaling molecule. The most studied SCFA is butyrate. Butyrate doesn't just nourish the cells lining the colon, it actually crosses into the bloodstream and binds to specific G protein-coupled receptors on the surface of our own immune cells.
Wow.
Yeah, and when butyrate binds to these receptors, it inhibits the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines and promotes the generation of regulatory T cells.
Wait, so the bacteria in our gut are actively sending chemical text messages to our immune system, telling it to calm down and stop systemic inflammation.
Precisely. The large intestine isn't a trash compactor at all. It is a critical bioreactor managing our systemic immune response.
Okay, so diffusion pushes the glucose and amino acids into the blood, the lymph system carries the fats, and the gut bacteria are managing inflammation.
Now we arrive at metabolism.
Yes.
How do the cells actually use this fuel? Because I read a statistic from the Soul's text that honestly derailed my entire understanding of human energy expenditure.
Ah, you're talking about the basal metabolic rate calculation. Yes. The text states that roughly 70% of our daily energy intake is used just to keep our organs and tissues alive while we sit perfectly still.
Your BMR.
Right, BMR. But hold on, 70%. So you're telling me the calories I burned sitting here breathing dwarf the calories I burned on a 3-mile run this morning. How does the math on that actually work in the cells?
It makes perfect sense when you look at the microscopic level. Every single cell in your body has an electrical charge, maintaining a resting membrane potential.
Okay.
To maintain that charge, cells constantly run sodium-potassium pumps. These proteins physically push sodium out of the cell and pull potassium in against their concentration gradients.
Which takes energy.
An immense amount of ATP, yes. Cellular energy. I mean, your brain alone consumes about 20% of your daily glucose just to keep its neurons firing.
So the background operating system of human biology is just incredibly expensive to run. How does the body manage that massive, constant energy demand between meals?
By alternating between two physiological states, the fed state and the fasted state. And the organ managing this transition is the pancreas.
I always try to visualize the pancreas like a just-in-time warehouse supply chain. When a massive shipment of glucose arrives after a meal, the fed state, the warehouse manager, realizes there's too much inventory for the factory floor to use right now.
Right.
So the manager starts frantically opening storage doors to pack it away. And in the body, that manager is insulin.
That is an incredibly accurate metabolic analogy. Inside the pancreas are clusters of cells called the islets of Langerhans. When blood sugar rises, the beta cells within those islets release insulin. Insulin travels through the blood, binds to receptors on muscle and fat cells, and signals them to pull glucose transport proteins to their surface. It literally opens the warehouse doors. The excess glucose is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles.
And if those shells are full.
It's converted into triglycerides and stored in adipose tissue.
And the fasted state.
Yeah.
Because the trucks stop delivering glucose. But the factory, like the brain, the heart still needs constant power.
So the pancreas switches managers, blood sugar drops, and the beta cells stop releasing insulin. Instead, the alpha cells in the pancreas release a different hormone called glucagon.
Oh, glucagon.
Yeah. Glucagon travels straight to the liver and signals it to break down that stored glycogen, releasing glucose back into the blood to maintain a stable baseline. So beta cells release insulin to store fuel, and alpha cells release glucagon to mobilize it.
But what happens when that warehouse system breaks down? Because that brings us directly to type 2 diabetes, which the text highlights as a massive clinical burden.
It is.
If the warehouse is full and a patient keeps consuming high glycemic foods, what happens to the cells?
This is the exact mechanism of insulin resistance. If the bloodstream is chronically flooded with glucose, the pancreas responds by pumping out higher and higher levels of insulin.
Trying to force it into storage.
Right. Eventually, the body's cells get overwhelmed by the constant insulin signal. To protect themselves from taking in too much glucose, they downregulate. They literally pull their insulin receptors inside the cell membrane.
The warehouse removes the doors.
Yes. The pancreas is still screaming, still producing insulin, but the cells are ignoring the signal. So glucose remains trapped in the bloodstream, damaging the vascular walls, the kidneys, and the retinas.
Wow.
And this is fundamentally different from type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease where the immune system simply destroys the beta cells, meaning no insulin is produced at all.
Understanding these mechanisms, the liver storage, the receptor downregulation, the enzymes, it gives us an incredible toolkit for evaluating real-world clinical scenarios.
It really does.
For instance, I want to bring up a common situation. A patient comes in, they've recognized their metabolic health is declining, and they want to fix it. They tell you they are starting a 14-day detox T protocol to flush toxins, and they are switching to a strict 100% plant-based vegan diet to heal their gut.
Well, both of those interventions require immediate clinical context. Let's address the detox T first. From a physiological standpoint, detox diets are biologically redundant.
Because of the liver.
Exactly. The human body already possesses a highly advanced filtration and chemical neutralization system, the liver and the kidneys.
So the liver doesn't need a $20 tea to do its job.
Far from it. The liver utilizes a two-phase system involving cytochrome P450 enzymes to chemically alter lipid-soluble toxins, making them water-soluble so the kidneys can excrete them in urine.
And a tea won't help that.
No, you cannot augment this process with herbal teas. In fact, most commercial detox teas rely on ingredients like senna, which is just a powerful laxative.
So the patient isn't losing fat or clearing cellular toxins. They're just experiencing pharmacologically induced diarrhea.
Which is clinically dangerous. It rapidly depletes water volume and flushes out critical electrolytes like potassium and sodium. As we discussed earlier with the sodium-potassium pumps, altering those gradients can lead to cardiac arrhythmias.
Yikes. And what about the vegan diet? Obviously, a plant-based diet is going to provide massive amounts of fiber, which those gut bacteria will ferment into the SCFAs we talked about. That's a huge positive for systemic inflammation. But what are the clinical blind spots?
The blind spots involve protein synthesis and fat-soluble transport. We established earlier that 9 amino acids are essential. Animal proteins provide all 9 in optimal bioavailable ratios.
And plant proteins?
They're generally incomplete. For example, a grain like rice is deficient in the amino acid lysine, but rich in methionine. A loom like lentils is rich in lysine, but deficient in methionine.
Oh, I see. So the patient must strategically combine plant proteins throughout their digestive cycle to ensure the liver has the full spectrum of building blocks required to synthesize peptides like insulin.
Yes, precisely. Furthermore, they're at extreme risk for vitamin B12 deficiency. B12 is synthesized by bacteria in the guts of animals, meaning it is almost exclusively found in animal products.
Which does what exactly?
It's crucial for maintaining the myelin sheath around nerves and producing red blood cells. A strict vegan patient must supplement B12, or they risk irreversible neurological damage and pernicious anemia.
Man, while we're looking at the gut, the text also mentions the difference between food allergies and irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. Patients often conflate the two, saying they are allergic to certain fermentable carbohydrates, or FODMPs.
That's a critical diagnostic distinction. A true food allergy is an Ig-mediated immune response. The immune system flags a harmless protein as a deadly pathogen, triggering mast cells to dump massive amounts of histamine into the tissues, causing hives, airway constriction, and potential anaphylaxis.
Right, so it's an immune system misfire.
But IBS does not involve the immune system at all. It is a functional disorder linked to the gut-brain axis and visceral hypersensitivity.
How does that work?
When those gut bacteria ferment certain carbohydrates rapidly, they produce gas. In a normal patient, this causes minor bloating. But in an IBS patient, the nerves lining the intestines are hypersensitive to that stretching. This triggers the smooth muscles of the bowel to spasm violently.
Ouch.
Yeah, it is incredibly painful, but it is a neurological and mechanical issue, not an immune anaphylaxis.
The level of interconnectedness here is just staggering. When you start mapping out the mechanisms, you realize you can't tweak one variable without cascading effects across the whole system.
Exactly.
For you listening, next time you sit down to a meal, try conceptual exercise. You aren't just eating calories, you are initiating a sequence. As you chew, salivary amylase starts breaking chemical bonds. As the food hits your small intestine, think about the villi relying on concentration gradients to pull glucose into your blood.
That's a great way to think about it.
Think about your pancreas frantically switching warehouse managers, secreting insulin to open cellular doors before your blood sugar damages your vascular walls.
It forces you to view nutrition as applied biochemistry rather than, a moral failing or a marketing slogan. And as we look to the horizon of clinical practice, this concept of biological interconnectedness is accelerating.
Oh, definitely.
The text actually discusses an observational trial called Project 10K, which is tracking how different human beings respond to the exact same foods.
Because if we both eat a banana, my beta cells might pump out a massive insulin spike to handle the glucose, while your blood sugar remains completely stable.
Exactly. The researchers are mapping continuous glucose monitor data against individual DNA profiles and the specific, unique bacterial composition of each patient's large intestine.
Which brings us to a rather profound closing thought. If your gut microbiome is as unique as a fingerprint, and your genetics dictate how your cellular transport proteins are built, are we rapidly approaching the end of broad, standardized dietary guidelines?
It is highly likely. The medicine of the future won't be a generic food pyramid. It will be a hyper-personalized nutritional prescription engineered specifically for your genetic code and the trillions of bacteria living inside your colon.
We are moving from the murky waters of diagnostic guessing to an era of absolute bio-individual precision. Something for you to ponder until the next deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanisms, and we will see you next time.